Hey, CityLight Church, this is Pastor Ian here this morning. Super excited about Sunday morning with you guys. So, quick announcement before we get started. We're going to be trying something a little bit different this week. We didn't really come up with an official name for it, but what we're going to be doing is be doing the sermon over the course of the entire week. So, I don't know about you, but for me personally, it is really hard to sit down and watch a longer video on Sunday morning, and I find myself having a really difficult time paying attention. And I think most people are going to be more or less the same way. For whatever reason, while we could maybe sit down and watch somebody in person for, half hour to even 2 hours, give a sermon. Hopefully you don't have to do that too often, but I have before. While we could do that, for whatever reason, and maybe it's just the availability of distractions or whatever, it's just much more difficult to do that when we're in front of a screen. So what we want to try and do is take our Sunday sermon and break it up over the course of the week. So we'll give you a piece of it this morning. It won't be as long as it normally is, but then throughout the week we can stay posted looking for videos on Facebook coming up. And we'll also try and email them out to you guys so you have them in a couple different places that way. But what's going to happen is, while we're going to have our normal Sunday service, the message isn't going to be completed today. We're just going to cover a part of the text, and then as we move through the week, we'll do a little bit each day, just 3 to 5 minutes, whatever, and we'll talk about different parts of the text and how they're relating to our lives. And one other thing that we want to start trying to do during this time is trying to figure out how we can, working together as a church, as a team, as a body, to figure out how to really live these things out. So we want to try and incorporate more discussion, whether that's among peers or if you're coming to one of our great social distanced watch parties. That's a great place that we can start having these discussions. But even throughout the week, as we're doing these shorter pieces of the sermon and we're living them out together, just a little bit at a time, just getting in the habit of taking some reflection questions that we're going to be putting your way and asking people around you. Maybe it's your family, maybe it's reaching out to another church member via text or whatever. But just taking that time to say, like, hey, how can I be living out the text this week? How can I be working on what Jesus is teaching me right here, right now? Even in this super funky, weird time we're finding ourselves in, where things just aren't normal. And that's okay. We can adapt and overcome and trust God through all of this, and do our best to live according to His commandments. So all that to say, we'll be here a little bit shorter today, but it's still going to be really good, and I think we're going to have a really helpful time together. So if you have a Bible, you can go ahead and grab that. We're going to start in John chapter 15 and verse 12. While you're finding your place there, I want you to think about some time when you've had a really hard time before. Maybe it was something sudden. A month and a half ago, I had an uncle pass away suddenly, and he was pretty close. And man, it hit me hard, because my Uncle Russell was just a real funny guy, and he was just a character. You'd have to know him. But losing someone in the middle of this pandemic means, we haven't even had a memorial service yet, because he lived in California, and it's just not super safe to be traveling and grouping up in California right now. So we're holding off on a memorial service. All these normal things where you would get together, get in a group, and get closure with one another, to grieve in community. Those sorts of things we're not able to do them right now because it's not safe. So just thinking through your life of maybe something that's, been tough to deal with or difficult or tragic, whatever that might be. It's something where if we stop and pause and think about those situations, we're going to realize that they're much easier to deal with in community. Without that community, without a group of believers living and working together, it just becomes really difficult to deal with. Why? Because we end up in isolation, in this bubble by ourselves. And you sit and you deal with these things, and you just find those thoughts bouncing around your head, and it feels like we don't have anyone to go to, anyone to talk to, and that can feel a little hopeless sometimes and a bit despairing. So what do we do about that? Because, especially when we consider how we're supposed to remain physically distanced from one another right now, how we're supposed to, stay apart and stay home as much as possible. When we stop and think about those things, it just becomes clear that, man, cultivating community, dealing with problems, any issues we're having, that's going to be really difficult for us right now. So we need to think carefully about how we're going to deal with that. Now, as we think about those situations in our own lives, I think that's going to give us a really good entree into the text today. So if you found John 15:12, I'm going to go ahead and read our whole passage. It's a bit longer. It goes down to 16:4. And then we'll start to kind of piece together the main ideas of that today. And then throughout the week, we'll deal with individual sections and see how those apply to our lives. So 15 verse 12. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that someone laid down his life for his friends. You're my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends, for all that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. These things I command you, so that you will love one another. If the world hates you, know that it hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love you as its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out from the world, therefore the world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you. A servant is no greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they kept my word, they will also keep yours. But all these things they will do to you on account of my name, because they do not know him who sent me. If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not have been guilty of sins, but now they have no excuse for their sins. Whoever hates me hates my Father also. If I had not done among them the works that no one else did, they would not be guilty of sin, but now they have seen and hated both me and my Father. But the word is written in their law must be fulfilled. They hated me without a cause. But when the Helper comes, whom I will send to you from the Father, the Spirit of truth, who proceeds from the Father, he will bear witness about me. And you also will bear witness, because you have been with me from the beginning. I have said all these things to you to keep you from falling away. They will put you out of the synagogues. Indeed, the hour is coming when whoever kills you will think he is doing a service to God. And they will do these things because they have not known the Father nor me. But I have said these things to you, that when their hour comes, you may remember that I told them to you. So, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when I try and read what Jesus is talking about, I just go, "Oh, what in the world is he trying to say?" Um, and it gets a little more difficult sometimes when we stop and think about this because where we are right now, it's Jesus' last night on earth. He's talking to his disciples, and this is one big, long, extended speech that goes from chapter 14 to chapter 17. And if we just look at this through this little microcosm, just by itself, in this chunk here, we're going to have a really hard time understanding what he's talking about. So we really have to think about that whole speech. Now, the reason why I feel like it gets a little trickier here is because this is Jesus' last speech. It's his last night, whatever. I guess I shouldn't say last speech, but you get what I'm saying. But because of that, Jesus is just laying it out here for his disciples, and what he's trying to do is say things super clearly. He's trying to, he's not speaking in parables here, you notice. He's not using these big old grand metaphors. He's trying to speak plainly and clearly about what's about to happen to him, and how that should affect them moving forward. So we see, like, in chapter 13, leading up to this speech, Jesus washes his disciples' feet, right? That's unheard of, insane. John did a great job teaching us about what that means in light of everything. In chapter 14, he starts this speech. They want him to show them the Father, and Jesus says, wait, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father, and there's a helper coming, and I want you to obey me, and I give you true peace, all that kind of stuff. Last week with Stephen, we entered into chapter 15, and there's this true vine, this abiding here. Well, I guess we have a metaphor there, but so Jesus says, abide in me and I in you, and you'll bring forth fruit. Okay? Stephen did a great job explaining that last week. I don't want to do too much there, but I do want to pick up at the end of what he's saying there. The last couple verses. As the Father's loved me, starting in verse 9, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. And if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept the Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. So when Jesus is saying, keep my commandments, he lays it out real clearly here where we're picking up in verse 12. This is my commandment, that you would love one another as I have loved you. That verse is going to be key to understanding this text. Now, when we look at that, we say, man, this is super clear. Love people. I get that. Be nice. Do unto others as you'd have them do to you. I've got that. I don't maybe do it all the time, but I at least understand the concept. So that's good. But when we keep going through the text, it doesn't all remain so clear. Well, we're not servants, we're friends. Well, I didn't think of myself as a servant. Bearing fruit again, what's that mean? And if the world hates you, well, who hates me? I don't know about that. And then remember that the servant's not greater than his master. Okay, so they're going to persecute me. Well, man, I liked the love part a bit better. That sounded better than this. Wow, and somebody's guilty for sin, and so the Holy Spirit again, he talks about him, and he said this all to keep us from falling away, and it feels like we've kind of gotten off base from the whole love thing, right? So again, I don't know about you, but sometimes when I read Jesus, it's just like, even when you're speaking clearly, I feel like I have a hard time picking up on what you're trying to say. But this is where I think, in my life, learning to, instead of going, oh man, if I'd not done the works that no one else did, they would not be guilty of sin, and just laser focus on that guilty of sin bit. Because when I laser focus on something, I feel like I just get more confused. One of the things that I've learned to do is when I can't see where I am in the forest to to back up and actually try and look at the forest instead of looking at the trees that are right around me and trying to figure it out. When we start looking at the bigger picture of the text, it starts to make sense. Let's re-examine this progression again. Jesus is commanding his disciples immediately that you guys have to love one another. This is the deal. You're not servants, you're friends. And because of that, we need to love one another. Now, let's connect the next thoughts. Why? Because the world is going to hate you. They've hated me, and they're going to hate you too. Why? Because you represent me. Now, how does that relate? Well, think about it. Actually, let's keep going for just a sec. They hated me, and because and Jesus is alluding all over to this place that they're hating him so much they're going to kill him. You can look over at verse 13. For that greater love has no man than this, than he lays down his life for his friends. He's foretelling, giving a little bit of, hey, guess what? I'm about to demonstrate how great my love is for you, which is the basis for you loving one another. But they're going to hate you. And as we get down into verse 16, chapter 16 and verse 2, it says, they will put you out of the synagogues. Indeed, the hour is coming that when whoever kills you will think that he is offering a service to God. Whoa, that's a whole lot more extreme than hatred, right? So we've got love, and that's juxtaposed with this hatred, but then it grows into this allegedly divinely sanctioned capital punishment that's going on. So what's going on here? Jesus is saying hard times are coming. You guys are about to experience trials in my absence. So what is the key to that? There are two big things that Jesus says here. The second one is you're going to have the Holy Spirit, and you and the Spirit are going to bear witness about me together. But the other one, the thing that we need to do as a community of disciples, a community of believers, is that we need to love one another. In order to make it through hard times, in order to make it through trials, to stick together amidst opposition, we need to love one another with a self-sacrificial love like Jesus loved. A love that doesn't just look out for me and my own, hey, I'm not affected, so I'm not worried, but a love that says, I will take myself and put my needs aside to consider the needs of the community, to lay down my life figuratively for my friends, because the other people in this community, they're not my servants. They weren't Jesus' servants, so they're not my servants. If he called them friends, then they ought to be considered my friends as well. Because Jesus, just as Jesus chose his disciples, we're chosen for this task of obedience to love one another. And that's the whole key of this text. Hard times are coming. In order to make it through those hard times, we need to display love to one another. One of the ways that we're trying to love our neighbor here at CityLight is to not hold some of these larger gatherings right now, because we don't want to put people at risk of losing their life because of this virus that's going on. That's one practical step we're taking in this pandemic, but that comes with undesirable side effects. Not being able to gather together and to be together as an entire church body. That is difficult because there's so much love and encouragement that we're able to communicate to one another there in person, face to face, that if we're honest, it's just so hard to do over a text. I can reach out to someone and say, "Hey, man, I love you, praying for you," but it's just not the same as giving someone a big old hug when they come in. But that's not safe to do, and because we want to love one another, we're going to refrain from doing those things for the time being until it's safe to do so, hopefully. So as a church, hi Laura, my dog just came over and she wants to say hi. But as a church, that's one of the ways that we're trying to show love for our neighbors. But that means that we have to get more creative in how we show love amongst the disciples in the church. How are we going to show love toward one another in the midst of a global pandemic? So here's my question to you guys today. What is something, it doesn't have to be big, some concrete step you can take to show love to one of your fellow church members this week? Maybe it's door dashing them lunch or something, or dinner. Maybe it's an encouraging text or a phone call, or maybe you even FaceTime them. Some people don't love to do that. Some people don't love to receive it. But what I want you guys to do this week is to take some time and try and be thoughtful and thankful for what's going on, but to creatively, don't let the pandemic stop us from showing love to one another. Help us to live out this great commandment. Let's work together as a church. How can we creatively show love to one another during this pandemic? Let's focus on that today, reflect on it, and get an action plan going, a game plan, something we can do this week that will show love to one another. Hey guys, love you. We'll be praying for you today. And tune in this week. Pay attention for those videos popping up in the evenings on the weekdays. We're going to cover this text in more detail and work through some of the challenges and tricks in it and try and make some sense out of it and figure out more of what Jesus wants us to do here. Okay, love you guys so much. Have a great Sunday.